I get it. You've been scrolling through a sea of small shop lathes, wondering if you should finally take the plunge or keep tinkering with a benchtop mill that's been holding you back. You probably imagined a tool that's big enough to handle a decent range of projects but compact enough not to hog your garage, and then you saw the Sherline 4410 DRO metric 17-inch lathe with a factory-installed digital readout. It feels like the sweet spot between hobbyist and semi-professional, but the price tag can still make anyone pause. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, and that way you can compare the exact configuration to your own list of must-haves before you click Add to Cart. First off, let's talk about the core promise of this machine, a 17-inch swing over the bed paired with a built-in DRO that eliminates the guesswork of manual dials. For anyone who's spent an evening squinting at a dial, turning the handwheel, then rechecking a part with a caliper, the DRO feels like a small miracle. It gives you a live readout of the carriage position, so you can cut to a precise length in one go instead of hopping between measure. In practice, that means you can finish a small batch of 1/4-inch bolts or a set of custom knobs in a fraction of the time you'd spend with a purely analog setup. That being said, the lathe isn't a magic box that turns raw metal into museum pieces with zero effort. The 4410 still uses the classic Sherline design, a fairly lightweight cast iron bed, a 2-step motor for the spindle, and a manual feed system that you'll have to get comfortable with. The DRO sits on top of the carriage and draws power from a small external transformer, so you'll need a dedicated outlet or a power strip with enough headroom. If you're used to a fully integrated CNC rig that plugs straight into the wall and runs a controller, the extra wiring can feel like a step back. It's a trade-off. You get the precision of a digital readout without the cost and complexity of a full CNC upgrade, but you also have to manage the separate power supply and the occasional calibration. Who should consider this lathe? If you're an experienced hobbyist who already knows the basics of turning, how to set up a workpiece, select the right tool geometry, and read a micrometer, then the DRO will slot right into your workflow and shave off a lot of repetitive measurement. It's also a solid entry point for someone who's been doing a lot of 3D printed prototypes and now wants to start machining metal parts that need tighter tolerances. The 17-inch swing is generous enough to handle most small to medium projects like motor housings, small gear blanks, and even a handful of larger workpieces if you're willing to compromise on length. And because the DRO is factory installed, you won't have to wrestle with retrofitting a separate system, which can be a headache for people who aren't comfortable with aligning sensors and mounting brackets. On the flip side, if you're looking for a machine that will run continuously in a shop environment, or if you need a heavy-duty lathe that can handle large, thick steel bars without chatter, you'll probably want to look elsewhere. The Sherline's cast iron bed, while sturdy for its size, does have a lower mass than the big industrial lathes, so it can transmit vibrations when you're cutting harder materials at higher speeds. Users have reported that when you push the spindle to its upper RPM range on a dense alloy, the finish can start to show a faint pattern of chatter unless you dial back the speed and use a more forgiving cutter. That's not a deal breaker if you're mainly working with aluminum, brass, or soft steel, but it's something to keep in mind. Another practical consideration is the accessory ecosystem. Sherline has a fairly extensive line of chucks, collets, and tooling, but many of those items are sold separately. The base 4410 comes with a standard 3-jaw chuck, which is fine for round stock, but if you need to hold hexagonal or irregular shapes, you'll have to buy a dedicated collet or a special chuck. The same goes for live tooling. If you want to do drilling or tapping without swapping the carriage, you'll need the appropriate live tool attachment, which adds to the overall cost. The good news is that the modular nature of the system means you can upgrade piece by piece as your project list expands, but you should budget for those extras from the start. Let's walk through a real-world scenario. Imagine you're building a custom CNC router and need a set of precision aluminum rods for the linear guides. You measure each rod to 12.5 inches, cut them on a larger mill to rough size, then bring them to the Sherline for the final length and finish. With the DRO, you set the carriage to 0, bring the rod up to the cutting tool, and then advance exactly 12.5 inches, taking a light cut that leaves a smooth surface. You repeat the process.